To continue, now we have to Professor Luz de Teresa introduce to Professor Axel Osses. You can start, Professor Luz de Teresa.
So thank you very much, Axel. It's a pleasure to present him. Axel works at the University of Chile, and his main line of research has been the control and inverse problems in PDEs. And he has also led to the development of important applications in geophysics, medicine, and astronomy. His articles are on theoretical mathematics, on the topic of control and inverse problems, and PDEs using Gell-Lehmann inequalities, wave propagation, and photon transport, for example. But he also works in some applications as geophysics, medicine, and astronomy. So it's a pleasure to have you in the seminar, Axel. You can start.
Thank you, Luz de Teresa. Thank you, all of you, to be here, and thank you for the organization of this interesting seminar. I see a lot of universities in Brazil, in Spain, Mexico, etc., in Chile also. So thank you for the invitation and for the diffusion we can give to our work. This is a joint work with Nicolás Barnafi. He's a young researcher. He did a PhD in numerical analysis in Italy, and now he has a position at the Catholic University in Chile. He passed also by the Center of Mathematical Modeling. So in the Center of Mathematical Modeling, we began to work in this application to fibers. So, which is the application? The idea is to recover the direction of fibers in the heart, particularly in the ventricle, and particularly in the left ventricle. So it's really an interesting problem for physicians and has a lot of medical applications for surgeries and diagnostics to know which is the distribution of fibers in the heart for the patient in a non-invasive way. The idea is to discover or to model the fibers. So there's some models, existing models for fibers, but we propose a new approach based on the Franco-Sine equations, which are equations that model liquid crystals. So the idea is to see the fibers as liquid, as oriented crystals, if you want. And this was a first just an algorithmic idea, but then we discovered with a group of physicians in France that they proposed, in fact, this model from clinical observations, from experiments. So there's some experimental validation of this type of models for the heart. So I will present that. There's not so much mathematics since this is a subject that we are starting, but there's a lot of challenges for inverse problems, numerical analysis, analysis of PDE, nonlinear PDEs, etc. So which are these equations, the Franco-Sine equations? The unknown is a vector field D, which is unitary. So the norm of this vector field is 1. And so the modulus is not important. The only important thing is the orientation of this vector field. And the idea is to minimize the energy, the H1 energy of this field in a domain with this restriction, with the restriction that the modulus has to be always 1 everywhere. So if we write the Euler equations, you want corresponding to this minimization, we obtain what we see in the box. And these are the Frank-Cosine equations. So it's a partial differential equation, nonlinear, since lambda is the gradient of the field to the square. So it's a nonlinear partial differential equation with a restriction of unity in the domain. So these type of solutions are called harmonic maps in mathematics. They were studied a lot since they are very, very interesting from the point of view of topology. For instance, there are singularities also in the solution. There are auto-similar solutions, and the applications in physics and computations are very wide, not only in the Earth, as we will see, but the typical applications are in microelectronics, in magnetohydrodynamics, etc. So I will start with a very simple example of the Frank-Cosine equations in 1D. So one dimension, an interval, and we can try to solve these equations in 1D. So for instance, with boundary conditions, in this case, in the left-hand side, we have a vector pointing to down, unitary vector, and in the right extreme of the interval, we have a vector pointing up. So the idea is to solve the equations in the interior with these boundary conditions, and the solution is this type of rotating field, unitary rotating field going from down to up. No? And how we can prove that is very easy. We write, for instance, U and V are the components of the vector D. So U is the horizontal component and V is the vertical component. We can write the equations as I show in the right-hand side here, in the right part of the screen. So the equations are those equations, okay? But here, these are nonlinear equations. It's a nonlinear system of ordinary differential equations, since lambda is the modulus of the square of the gradient of the solution. So is if you want the U prime square plus V prime square, what I show here. So this is lambda. So, but if we try to solve these equations without considering that lambda is a constant, it's a very simple system of equations we can solve explicitly. And at the end, we can impose that lambda is the gradient, and this is a coincidence, if you want, at the end, since for some frequency, some specific frequency, we obtain exactly the solution of the nonlinear system. So, well, at the end, the solution is a linear combination, or is a combination, if you want, of the two extremes. A is the vector pointing down, and B is the vector pointing up, for instance. And this is a combination, if you want, of the two vectors with modulus 1. And this is very well known in the context of interpolation, and it's called the spherical linear interpolation in computer graphics, or also it's called the quaternion interpolation. And it's used a lot in computer graphics to, for instance, if you have at time t1 a camera pointing at some point and in a scene, and then in time t2 you have the camera pointing in another direction. The idea is to move the camera smooth in order to point from one initial direction to another final direction. So this is typically the way we compute the movement of the camera, or the change of direction in which is pointing the camera. So this is the application in computer graphics. But it's surprising that this interpolation is exactly the solution of the Frank-Cosine equations in liquid crystals, okay? This is very important since this is the method that is used now for in the HERT, this type of interpolation. So there's some equivalence between the interpolation for using quaternions and solve the Franco-Sin equation. But let's go to 2 dimensions. In 2 dimensions, the situation is more interesting, since in this case we have to solve a nonlinear system, a more complicated nonlinear system. So let's see how we can compute some solution to see the type of solution we have. So in this case, we took a very simple example of a disk with 2 boundary conditions. One boundary condition is rotating in the, if you want, counterclockwise in the exterior of the disk, and is rotating in the opposite direction in the interior of the disk. In fact, this will be the exterior part of the ventricle and the interior part of the ventricle in the case of the heart. So the idea is to compute a solution of the Franco-Sin equations that satisfies these boundary conditions. So let's say that in fact is not really necessarily a solution of the problem, can be a critical point, since we are solving the Euler equation. So we are solving just we will find a critical point, a point of if you want local minima of the function, and not necessarily the solution of minimal energy. Here I put some bibliography concerning this problem in mathematics. So there's a lot of bibliography in the 80s, in the 90s, and also people interested in this relationship between regularity and topology, which type of singularities we can have, etc. But I will not enter in details, but I put there, if you are interested in, some references. And there's a very good review of Bresis of 2003, explaining which are the type of solutions we expect for this type of problems in several dimensions. So it's important the dimension of start and the dimension of the end. In this case, the dimension is we are going from 2 dimensions to 2 dimensions. Means we try to obtain a 2-dimensional field in this case, or a 3-dimensional field in the case I will show later. So if we, for instance, you will write the equations in 2 dimensions in a disk. Let's forget for a moment the interior part, but let's put just the exterior part, boundary condition that is unitary and rotating. So the boundary condition is minus sinus theta cosinus theta, and n is the number is the degree, no, of the n. You can think that n is 1. Yeah, just one is rotating and turning one time. Okay, it's the degree of rotation. So and we have at the left-hand side a nonlinear PD. So this nonlinear PD with this constraint of unitary norm, and with these boundary conditions on the boundary of the disk. So we suppose that the solution, or we search for a solution, particular solution that is a rotation with respect to the radius of this boundary condition. So we suppose that the solution depends just on the radius, and is a rotation of this field. So the unitary condition stay invariant, but just the direction is changing with this rotation. So if we put these ansatz in the equations in polar coordinates, so r and theta, are the variables. We can find a very simple at the end equation for the rotation angle. That is this equation, the second derivative of the angle plus the first derivative divided by r equal to 0 with this boundary condition, and the solution of this equation is just a logarithm on the radius with some arbitrary constants you can adjust. So the solution is the rotation of this boundary condition with a function that depends on the log of the radius. Okay, so when the radius is r, the exterior radius, there's no rotation, but when you go inside the disk, there's mass and mass rotations as in the figure here. So we have this type of solution, a solution that rotates, okay, several times to the interior of the disk. So we see some attractive orbits, some repulsive orbits. If we draw the trajectories associated to this field, okay, we see the figure at the right. Okay. So which are the interesting things here? For instance, this solution is a solution of in the disk of infinite energy. Is a solution that is not in H1, which is the space of energy, but is in this sublevel space W1P with P strictly less than 2. So the first derivatives are not in L2, but are in some space weaker than L2. And this is coherent with the theory, since all the theory that I show here studied the solution of finite energy, okay? And this is a solution that is of infinite energy, so I should say it's a new solution of the equations, but you have to relax this, or you have to put, or to put something around the origin in order to, okay, to avoid this singularity in the interior. In the ventricle, the heart ventricle, this is possible since the ventricle, okay, has an interior part, but there will be a problem in the lower part of the ventricle that we call the apex. We will see that. We will see some singularity at the end. So there's the mathematical challenge to study this type of solutions, which is the correct problem we have to solve. We propose something, for instance, to study this energy not in L2 but in LP, trying to find solutions in W1P, etc. So there's some results in this direction also. I will not show now. These are some numerical figures showing this type of solutions in the case where the origin is not there. We put some interior part for different radius. So now we wanted to study solutions or try to find some solutions in 3 dimensions. So in 3 dimensions, the idea was the same, trying to have an ansatz, so have an idea of a possible solution using rotations in order to keep this condition of modulus 1. And we inspired our results in some topologies we can find in astronomy. There's some experience working with astronomers and protoplanetary disks. So I will explain why. So if you see the distance of the planets from the sun, this distance, if we add the asteroid belt, is in a log scale almost linear. So the orbits of the planets follow exactly the same behavior as this. Okay. If we see just in 2 dimensions, it was the projection on the orbits. Okay. So the idea was to use, since this is the same behavior, to use some topologies, if you want, that we observe in protoplanetary disks. So to have orbits, but also to have some other thing. And this other thing is called vortex. And we have we will try to find solutions which have orbits or spirals in the plane XY and vortex in the vertical axis. Yeah? So we will use, in this case, both cylindrical and spherical coordinates to try to find explicit or almost explicit solutions to the equation. So the idea is to use this to find this type of solutions. We had orbits in the XY plane and vortex in the X. This is not in the article, so this is the real, honest inspiration of the solutions we found. So the idea is to search for solutions now for instance, in cylindrical coordinates that are in this case r, the radius, theta, the azimuth, and z, the elevation, or the vertical component, in a form also of rotations in the radius, but also rotations that depends, or another rotation that depends on the elevation, angle, which is the radio between the vertical distance and the radius in the plane, in the horizontal plane. Why? And the reason was the previous. Why? Since this solution in astronomy, or these topologies in astronomy, depends on the elevation angle. And the idea is to have a singularity when the elevation angle goes to pi/2. So goes vertical or minus pi/2, have a singularity. And okay, there's a way to write equations in sort of decomposition using some matrices that are symmetric or antisymmetric. And at the end, what we found, what we have is here. We obtain also now an ordinary differential equation of second degree for some parameter of the ansatz. But the interesting thing is that in this case, the solution is what is called a Jacobi solution. What are the Jacobi solution? The amplitude of Jacobi, the cosinus of Jacobi, and the sinus of Jacobi are generalizations of the trigonometrical functions from a circle to an ellipse. Okay, so there are an elliptic cosinus and sinus that is called the Jacobi sinus and the Jacobi cosinus. Okay, after talking with people working on nonlinear partial differential equations, they say that in general there's a lot of people trying to find explicit solution of nonlinear partial differential equations using Jacobi series or Jacobi elliptic functions or series of Jacobi elliptic functions, etc. So there's some coherence with this finding and the methods that are using this type of nonlinear partial differential equations. But I will show you the expression is here at the lower part of the page. So the solution is a sort of rotation in elevation and in radius of this type. And the interesting thing is that the orbits, that is the logarithm part of the solution, are conserved, are the same as before in 2D. In 3D, we have the orbits, but also this part of the solution that depends on the elevation give us vortices. Okay? Now, this is not exactly a solution of the equation. There's a source term that is very small away from the origin, but it's very important near the origin. So we have to, this is, if you want, the first ansatz to the homogeneous equation. So, okay, bad news, we don't have exactly a solution of the Franco-Sin equation. We have an approximate solution of the Franco-Sin equation that can be useful for theoretical purposes or for numerical purposes. And which is this is as the left, we plot the trajectories, since the vector field is very difficult to plot and to understand, but the trajectories of the corresponding to this solution in 3D, and you can see the orbits here in the horizontal plane, but you can see also the vortices that are present in the vertical axis, okay? And this is exactly what we wanted to obtain, inspired from these proto-planetary disks. In astronomy, the planets forms in this plane, the red part here of the image, and the material is ejected in this vortex away from the plane. Okay, and this is exactly the trajectories. If we follow the trajectories here, the trajectories form eject, okay, in the vertical line. So this solution is very interesting for people working in PDEs, since they are always searching for solution of this type with singularities as vortices or orbits, and it's also the case for the Gifford-Landau equations. Gifford-Landau equations are similar systems of nonlinear PDEs, where also we are searching for some vortex. And this is a solution. I will not show the details in 3D, but using polar coordinates. So it's a solution that we can also an approximate solution that shows the same structure. So in this case, spirals in the horizontal plane and a vortex in the vertical line. All these solutions are of non-finite energy. All these solutions have singularities that gives singular solutions also. So this is also very interesting in the sense that there's these solutions that are not in the space H1, no? But in weaker spaces. In this case, I think it's in W1P with P smaller than 3/2. Okay, so they are more singular than in 2D. And here, some examples changing the number of twists or of the degree of the boundary or the rotation of the boundary condition. So this is the solution in 3D in spherical coordinates for n equal 1, for n equal 2, and for n equal 5. So these are interesting shapes we obtain. And now the Hertz. So for the Hertz, which is the relationship with the Hertz. So we are solving the same equations in a geometry that is a ventricle. So it's the left ventricle. And the idea is to find from boundary conditions that we have in the exterior part that is called the epicardium, and the interior part that is called the endocardium, the superior part that is called the basis, and the inferior point that is called the apex, okay, from conditions, boundary conditions. The idea is to solve the Franco-Sin equations and find this type of vector fields that represents the direction of the fibers. So, in general, in order to find the boundary conditions, what we do is what engineers do for compute the fibers. That is to solve first a very simple problem, a Laplacian, okay, and then take the gradient of this Laplacian in order to build a radial, if you want, a radial field, and then a sort of longitudinal field, and take the cross product of both in order to obtain a sort of rotated vector field. And then with these boundary conditions, we solve the Franco-Sin equations in the interior of the heart. And you can see it's exactly if you cut here transversally the left ventricle, you find exactly the type of solutions we were visiting previously in 2D. And this is the medical data we are working with now in team with these physicians from an hospital in Grenoble, France. They worked several years in this project, and the idea was to find the direction of the fibers in the heart using crystallographic methods. If you know, if in crystallography we can obtain the direction of the crystals from polarized light. They use exactly the same technique, but with some samples of the heart, okay? And they discovered that the typical singularities that we can find in liquid crystals are present in the heart. So in the 2 years ago, they proposed the nematic structure or the liquid crystal structure of the cardiac fibers, but was an hypothesis they had several years ago. But for the first time, they had some experimental supporting data for this hypothesis. This is the hospital in Grenoble, directed by Pierre-Simon Duc and Yves Husson. And they have also this type of analysis. For instance, in this case, we can see at the left-hand side the ventricle, a cut of the ventricle in the up-down direction, and also a cut of the left ventricle in the transversal direction. And they also identify some structures that they call the Clairaut surfaces. And they hypothesize that these Clairaut surfaces had some topological structure, okay? And a good news is that these topological structures they found for experiments are the same that we can find from numerical results. So this is at the left-hand side, the numerical solution of the Franco-Sin equations, and we draw the Clairaut. I will not explain exactly which are the Clairaut, but it's essentially the cosinus of the elevation. And we obtain exactly the same torus topology here that they observe in experiments. So we are very happy with that, and they are very happy with that, since apparently the Franco-Sin equations are a very good model to compute the direction of fibers in the heart. So which are the inverse problems that are related to that? The first one, and the simplest one, should be just to try to adapt the model, the Franco-Sin model, and the boundary conditions to the real data that we have. For the moment, it's very difficult to have real data from the heart, even if we use MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. So the data of these physicians in Grenoble are very important to validate the model. So the first problem, inverse problem, is just to try you want to determine some critical parameters to validate the model. And the second inverse problem is more complicated, is well, I will explain that in an inverse problem too. So the inverse problem one is very simple, is just try to minimize the distance between the Franco-Sin model and the real data that they provide using some regularization. And the main parameter is the rotation angle in the boundary conditions. That is, we know that it depends on each patient, is patient dependent. So the idea is to try to adjust this rotation parameter from the epicardium to the endocardium. So you remember, no, when you have a direction in the exterior part of the ventricle and another direction that can be even opposite in the interior part of the ventricle. So the idea is to rotate the wall field from one direction to the other direction. So this is the angle that commands, which is the total rotation angle between the endocardium and the epicardium. And the second inverse problem is much more ambitious, is now it will be part of the doctoral thesis we are starting in Chile. And the idea is to try to recover some parameters of the model, but from mechanical data. So there's a contraction, periodic contraction of the heart, okay, that impulse the blood from the heart to the brain, for instance, from the left ventricle with a lot of force. And for instance, there's the problem. We think this distribution of fibers, or the physician says that this distribution of fibers is trying to optimize some mechanical energy in order to have the maximal pressure, okay, with the minimal energy. And also, which is the model that can model best this contraction. And in general, it's very complicated since the contractions has 3 steps. One is due to the voltage that is propagating, that propagates in the surface. And this propagation, the diffusion depends on the fibers, the diffusion direction. Also, there's the mechanical displacement of the tissue that is governed by nonlinear elliptic elastic equations, in this case, hyperelasticity, where the Piola tensor depends on the direction of the fibers also. And also there's some fluid structure complications. So the general problem is very complicated, but we want to do some simpler things. For instance, here there's a very simple simulation. In this case, we compare the contraction of the left ventricle using an hyperelastic model, using the computation of fibers from our method with using liquid crystals and the original engineer method that use quaternion interpolation. And we can see in a systole and diastole contraction, which is the displacement of the apex. So how much the inferior point of the heart moves. And in general, it moves more using our model. And this is an important difference. For instance, in general, the idea is that in the contraction, the apex moves a lot. And also there's a mathematical and numerical complication that is in the apex, there's a singularity of the Frank-Cosine equation. So it's very difficult to obtain numerically this singularity, and there's some numerical tricks to achieve that. And these are the main references we are using in general medical data, but also some theory from liquid crystals and some people working on numerical solutions of these equations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Axel, for your nice talk and interesting problems you're working on. And now we open the microphones and the chat for questions. I don't know
Thank
if
you.
there's something, a question, a comment. I don't see. Okay, so I have to ask something. No, I don't have. I have.
No.
So I think it's a very difficult model. And at some point, when you were modeling the astronomic thing, objects there, you use like cylindrical coordinates, but then you pass to polar coordinates. Do you know which one is better, which one approximates better the real situation?
Yes, the best approximation was using cylindrical coordinates. So in this case, where you have a vortex and sort of something that is happening near the horizontal plane.
Mm-hmm. But the other one is beautiful.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the findings were like very beautiful there.
Yeah, exactly. No, we are now working with some astronomers trying to give an interpretation of these solutions. But I think it will be easier in the heart. In the heart, we are more close to have some mechanical, justification of this type of equation.
Okay. Very nice. So
for astronomy, I think we have to wait some years.
I imagine, yes. Pitágoras Carballo says, excelente, muchas aplicaciones. So this is in Spanish, written there.
Thank you very much. Yes,
There's
a lot of open problems here. And also a very interesting link between liquid crystals and problems in biology.
Yes. It's interesting.
Biomedicine, say.
Any other comment or question?
I only wanted to say hello to Axel. I don't know if you remember me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
In Malta.
Yes. Hi. And a very interesting talk and very interesting work also. Yes. With nice pictures and yes, it's very nice. Thank you, Axel.
Thank you very much, Johnny.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
If nobody else has a question, we thank you again, Axel.
Oh, thank you.
Obrigada.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Sorry for this part that I will not, I have some problem with the connection just in the middle of the two talks, so sorry.
Oh.
Problem.
Okay.
Thank you, Lucero, and thank you a lot, Professor Axel Osses, for your amazing talk.